What's going on, guys? It's the Skylander dude back here with another video. Now today in this video we are starting a brand new series, creating Unreleased Skylanders. This series is exactly what it sounds like. I'm creating a custom from a Skylanders unreleased form. And in this first episode we have Happy Birthday Ben Starcast. Now Skylanders Eon made a great video that I'll link in the description about the history of this figure, but essentially this figure was only produced for the birthday party of Tom Brady's son Ben. So let's get right to it and start creating this custom.
So I'm starting the custom off here with a heat gun. I'm going to be heating up the Starcast figure and pulling apart the pieces rather than just painting straight on it. This will make the paint seem cleaner and it will also make it easier to paint as a whole. So I'm starting here with the feet, and I actually take off the leg here nice and seamlessly. It'll leave the space that the leg was glued into, meaning that I won't have to put a peg or something into it to hold the glue. It'll hold itself with that plastic piece. But then I twist off the foot here, which was a bit of a mistake, as I broke the actual peg that was holding into the base, which I wanted to cleanly take out, which wasn't that big of a deal. I redeemed myself with the second foot there. You can kind of see in the base how there's that hole left from the second foot. I then go back to the foot that's attached to the leg still. I heat that up with the heat gun and then pull that off nice and seamlessly. You can see, I'll show the legs at the end where you can see the plug there that held the foot together. And then I heat up the whole legs as a whole to take it away from the body. And everything was going pretty smoothly until my tripod collapsed. You can see me miss the catch there and it just falls to the ground. Luckily, I was able to set it back up and we're back in business. I was able to pull off the legs nice and clean to leave those pegs there. That was actually, the translucent plastic is much harder, so you can't actually bend and maneuver that as the softer plastic, which was the legs, the feet, and the helmet now, which is what I'm working on. The helmet was pretty hard because it's a lot of small pieces and a lot of areas where it's glued into. So heating it up and pulling it off, it was a long process. This is sped up, and I cropped a few bits out as well. But I used a screwdriver and I was able to pull that off. Then I'll take these pieces back to the table and show you what we got here. We have the base, of course, with one peg still stuck in it. The 2 feet with that peg missing there. And then we got the legs with the belt, and you can see those little bits where the feet will slide back into after I paint them. The helmet, it did actually start to crack as I was taking it off, so I'll be able to glue that and then repaint over that. That won't be an issue. And then the Starcast body as a whole with its stars attached. And then I started to scrape away the gold paint that was left inside of the, I guess, the face of Starcast there, just so I didn't want any of the gold paint to be seen as it's a translucent figure. I want because it's going to be painted red. And then later I was able to find out that you can just take the belt off from the Starcast legs without, there was no glue attached to it. It was just a bit of pressure, and it was held together because it was flared out at the top of the pants. So I pulled that off pretty easily. It'll make it easier to paint. Then I went ahead and attached some toothpicks and hot glue to all the smaller pieces, so I have something to hold while I'm painting them. And this would also make it easier to dry, so it's sort of floating in midair without it laying on the table or something and having that weird bit of dried paint stuck on the side of it or something. So then I start painting, actually. I start with the metallic red for the feet and the helmet. And this metallic red was so difficult to work with. You can see here how thin it's going on. And of course, I'm using the binder clip there just to hold the piece while it's drying. But you can see how thin it's going on. This is just the first coat here. And then I go back with the second, still super thin. This took about, I would say, I think it was 15 coats, maybe even more, at least 15 coats of this red metallic paint, which is the most coats I've ever put on a single figure for a custom, which kind of goes to show how long it actually took just for these 3 pieces here. And then we have the final coat of the red metallic paint for the feet and the helmet. You can see how bold that metallic red is now. This had to have been at least the 15th or 16th coat of paint. Moving on to the second foot here, and you can see how well this actually turned out. So I'm so glad that I stuck with the the numerous amounts of coats and used this brand of paint, because I've never actually used this brand for any sort of custom, which it ended up working out pretty well. You can see here, got a close-up of both the feet. Here's one of them there with the peg still stuck in it. That'll be easier to put back in the base. And then this one with the toothpicks attached that I will just remove right before I will glue everything together. And we got the helmet, of course, here. And this one was much easier than the feet because it was a gold to a red rather than a blue to a red. But then I moved on to the belt, and this was with the silver paint, or what I thought was silver paint, which I will get to in a second. And so yeah, starting the first coat with the belt, a thin layer as well, but not nearly as thin as the metallic red. And then I moved on to the shoulder pads of Starcast. Those are also in this silver. And this was quite difficult because I had to maneuver around the stars and the hands, because the hands are staying blue, but the stars just made it super difficult to keep a clean line between the clear body of Starcast and the silver shoulder pads on him. But after doing these coats of paint, I realized that this is actually, it was gunmetal gray was the specific color, and that just did not turn out as close to the silver as the actual figure. So I had to go get silver paint, and in the meantime, I started on the legs here, and this was white. Also, white to black is a little bit difficult, but it was easier than the metallic red, surprisingly. So here's the first coat of white, and using the binder clip to hold on to that one peg there, and then, of course, painting up and around, leaving a little black space for the belt. Oh, that's what I'll use to glue the belt back on once I finish painting everything else. Here's the second coat of white onto the legs. And you can already see with the second coat here how much better this is doing than any of the other coats of paint I've done so far. So this was surprisingly quite easy. And then here's a close-up of those legs painted all white, leaving that black space for the glue to have something to bond onto for both the belt and the inside of the feet. Now, being that this was filmed in December, apparently that means that everybody needs to buy silver paint for their Christmas crafting. So I couldn't find silver paint anywhere. I had to buy 8 ounces off of Amazon in order to finish this custom in time, which is much more than I usually get 2 ounces. So this was a much bigger bottle than what I needed, but I just needed the silver paint. So we're back in business with silver paint, painting back on to the belt here and the shoulder pads over that gunmetal gray, which was a disgusting gray. It was gray is what it was. I needed silver, and this silver is already looking much better, but of course still having to dodge around the hands and the throwing stars of Starcast. But you can kind of see here how much better this coat is doing, and then I'll give you a close-up here of the belt. That is much more closer to the silver of Happy Birthday Ben Starcast than what I had before. And here's the shoulder pads as well. Also much better. So glad that I actually went and changed that paint. But now that's over with, I will start the throwing stars here with the bronze throwing stars. And also going on quite thin. A lot of these coats are going to be quite thin because these metallic paints don't stick very well to the plastic of the figures. But you can kind of see here, it's slightly changing its color. And I have to paint in between each of the fingers within the throwing stars, which was quite annoying. And I couldn't really take off the throwing stars. I did try with the heat gun, but it started to crack the paint, and it wasn't going to come out as cleanly as anything else of the figure. So I had to leave the throwing stars in the hands, which made it slightly more difficult, but it's going to look better in the end anyways, because the stars would look like they'd be ripped off from the figure. And then here's a close-up. And then again, this color was that accurate to the actual bronze stars. We have a royal gold, which I guess is not the right color. I thought it would look pretty accurate, but it just wasn't, so I have to get some more paint. And in the meantime, we'll start on the base. This is happening a little bit more than it should with this figure. Starting with the base, I'm taping it off right on the edge of the bottom, because if you look at any other Sensei base, their elemental color only extends down to the very bottom of the figure base. And since, to my knowledge, we've never actually seen the bottom of a Happy Birthday Ben Starcast base, I just assumed that it would be similar to every other Sensei, even though it's not of the life element. It's probably only going to be painted down to that area. Then I slapped a bunch of paint on the bottom for a bit of a handle that I can use while I'm painting. And then I had to go in and do that ninja star. I did it off camera because I was just, my eyes were so close to the figure. You couldn't even, it wasn't a good angle. And I used very small pieces of tape to tape off that ninja star and hope for the best. I've had some luck with the painter's tape and some just terrible luck with the painter's tape, so I hope for the best. And then I went on with the green and painted the first coat, also super thin, which was probably the second most coats of this entire figure. First, of course, was the red metallic paint, but this one was at least 10 coats of green for the base. You gotta be careful when you're doing so many coats that you don't start to show the brush strokes, so sometimes you gotta switch up the direction you're painting. And then here for the last coat, I'm going back in and going in just the outer parts of the base, because the inner parts were already done. I didn't want to put any more coats on it if it looked all right. Then going back to the throwing stars, I took that royal gold and I got an antique copper. What's the name of this color? Such weird names. And actually took those two and mixed them to get the perfect color for the bronze stars, because that antique copper was way too red. So mixing it with the royal gold actually created the perfect color, I think, for the stars. It actually matched quite well. So I'm going back in and painting those stars again, dodging the fingers, dodging the hands, because I didn't want to get any paint on the blue hands, because we're saying a blue metallic color. And again, hard to see with the first coat as these metallic paints go on quite thin. But then you can see here on the very last coat how much better I think these stars came out. It's much closer to the bronze stars of the Happy Birthday Ben Starcast figure than what that royal gold ended up looking like. It was too close to the actual stars of the original Starcast figure. So I had to change it to make it as accurate as possible. So then once the paint dried on the base, I'm taking off the tape to leave that satisfying line. I'm glad that's actually turned out quite well. None of the paint bleeded down into the base. It left that perfect line, which is what I was hoping for on the bottom, you can see there. And then I had to go back in for the Ninja Star. Also hoping for the best, hoping I got lucky and none of the paint bled through onto the gold, because I couldn't really, I know I wasn't going to be able to repaint that gold Ninja Star, so I had to just paint around it. And luckily you can see here with that painter's tape that it held up quite well. It left a nice clean line of the Ninja Star. And then I had to do the inside, which is the black dot and the black little highlights on the points of the stars. So I went in with tape again, painting it, hoping for the best. But unfortunately, as you'll see here as I'm taking off the tape, that the paint just came off right with the tape. It didn't stick on to the Ninja Star at all. After seeing that, I knew I had to paint this freehand, which was something I was dodging. I didn't want to do that at all because I knew it wouldn't turn out as good as it would if I were to paint it with the painter's tape, but I had no other option. And so I used a thin piece of wire to actually spread around the paint, which I think it came out all right. I don't think it came out too bad. It looks pretty good, especially from a distance. You can't even really tell, which was good. And then I actually went back, took off those toothpicks and the hot glue, which the hot glue came off quite easily because hot glue is not very strong against this plastic, which is why I used it. And then it was time to super glue the figure together. Starting off with the pants and the silver belt, I just slid it back on like I took it off at the beginning. But the issue with that was, as I stretched the plastic, I actually chipped off some of the white pieces of paint. So I had to go back in, just touch that up real quick, and then I can continue the super gluing process, going back with the helmet, gluing that in where I scraped off all that gold paint, pushing in. It was actually quite a tight fit. I must have put too many, I did actually put too many layers of that red metallic paint on it, too many coats, and glued that back in nice and seamlessly. And then I went back into the legs, gluing the torso to the bottom of the belt and pushing that in just as it was when I took it out. Same thing with the feet, gluing those little pegs that I left and leaving that space empty of paint to have it bond to something. Then I glued the one peg into the base, and then I glued the other foot, or what was left of that peg, into the base.
So after hours of customizing, I finally have the finished product of the Happy Birthday Ben Starcast figure. Now what I thought was just going to be a simple repaint actually turned out to be quite a long process for this custom, but I think overall it turned out almost identical to the Happy Birthday Ben Starcast figure. And I got my original Starcast here just for a quick side-by-side comparison. So guys, let me know in the comments how you think I did on this custom, and let me know other ideas for more figures I can do in this Creating Unreleased Skylanders series. And with that, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Peace.